Why does Batman leave the Penguin alone when it comes to his criminal activities in particular? Why does Batman take exception to Oz Cobb? What rapport does the Penguin have that allows him to continue operating in Gotham, despite the fact that Batman knows full well what he does? And more importantly, how is this being set up in the universe of the Batman following the Penguin finale? Well, today, let's break it all down. The Penguin holds a special place among the rest of Batman's rogues gallery, as he's actually one of the craftiest villains that Batman deals with. He has certainly dealt with criminals who are smarter than Oz, but the Penguin has gotten his operation down to a science, and more importantly, he has learned what is important to Batman. In the comics, it's become very common for Oz to simply broker deals between criminals, or act as a middleman rather than getting directly involved. Oz is a master of network. He makes introductions. He puts resources together for a price. But since there are several stories where he isn't directly active in crime itself, there usually isn't much evidence of his involvement. Oz usually omits himself after the fact, or hides his involvement completely. The official channels of Gotham usually don't have much direct evidence to place Oz at the scene of any crime. He can avoid jail time through a combination of his ability to hide and his corruption of various Gotham officials, all who help him slither out of the justice system when things get bad. This, however, is not why Batman usually leaves Oz alone, since Batman understands exactly how the Penguin operates and knows that even if he can't prove it in a court of law, the Penguin is still active. The Penguin has bought off public officials and can get out of official punishment, but for Batman, this is an asset rather than a liability. It's something that helps Batman. The Penguin has spent years building a network of informants and contractors. He can connect any given criminal with the resources that they need, and for a hefty fee coming his way, he'll do it quick. This is the Penguin's business model. When he does commit a crime, it's important to note that the Batman does not give him any sort of special treatment, but when he acts as an introduction and nothing more, then the Batman has a different use for him. Batman has had his one consolidated source of information, one system that he can learn inside and out in order to help him track down other criminals. In some cases, such as the Reform storyline from the 80s and the Countdown arc, Batman has actually used the Penguin as a direct informant, whether it's voluntary or against his will. In fact, his relationship with Batman is so well known that it impacts his relationships with others, more hostile criminal factions that would want to see him toppled. During the events of Infinite Crisis, Batman was supposedly killed by Darkseid, and the Penguin's operations began to immediately crumble as a result of having lost Batman's support. Intergang led by Tobias Whale were able to overpower and oust the Penguin, leaving his empire to be assimilated into other networks. A similar thing happened during the Battle of the Cowl, where in that story, Black Mask came back and laid siege to the Penguin's remaining operations, and since he did not have the protection of Batman, he was backed into a corner. Criminals are waiting for his relationship with Batman to crumble, because as soon as it does, they will pounce, and they will shred the Penguin and everything he stands for. But the Penguin understands that sometimes sacrifices have to be made, so if he has to get rid of someone that Batman is immediately interested in capturing in order to keep him off of his own back and allow him to continue operations as they are, that makes sense to Oz in the long run. Not only does it stop Batman from picking apart his operation and making his professional life unnecessarily difficult, it also provides him protection from other gangs and syndicates that would otherwise run Gotham. To Batman, the Penguin is the perfect informant, and it's easier than having to hunt down one person every time a crime is committed. Criminal networks are going to form regardless, and as far as Batman is concerned, although the Penguin does do a lot of damage to Gotham, he's one of the smaller fish in comparison to its real dangers. If Oz was not in control, there would be operations which would result in dozens of smaller connections that Batman would have to take his time sifting through, and although he could eventually figure out what he needed, it would take him longer than he has time. Alternatively, if one crime lord does not rise up in Oz's place, then he runs the risk of opening the throne to a much more ruthless criminal, someone like Black Mask. Most of Oz's personal crimes amount to corruption, theft, and relatively small things, non-violent crime. This is not as important to someone who has more heinous acts being carried out at any given moment in Gotham. This isn't to say that there aren't exceptions though, just that it's common for the Penguin to be more of an underground businessman than an outright malicious criminal. And it is because of that fact that Batman and Penguin have an understanding. When Batman comes knocking, the Penguin can trade information, This is a detail that was painted very clearly in the universe of the Batman, especially when Oz was under Falcone. In the pilot episode, Alberto calls him a good soldier who only skimmed enough to get by, and we find out that Carmine knew that Oz was stealing from him. Oz was careful, and never took enough to make it worth Carmine's attention though, which allowed Oz to get some extra cash on hand, while Carmine kept serving as the face of the operation. If any fallout were to hit the syndicate, it would be on Carmine to handle, while Oz would get away clean. If he understands this dynamic as Batman grows into power, then we may see a complicated relationship where Batman leaves the Penguin relatively alone, as long as he remembers the lesson learned under Carmine, that he never takes too much, never steps over the line, and we've actually seen a glimpse into this already. In the Batman, he abducts Oz, and he and Gordon interrogate him, and even though it was difficult to get Oz, they cut him loose afterwards. Oz knows that the Batman is capable of a lot, and as time goes on, we will only see Bruce becoming more and more capable as he grows. The Batman was very much inspired by the arc of Batman Year 1, so we get to see him stumble and learn as he goes on, and we know full well that he's capable of becoming something greater. Oz is smart enough to see writing on the wall and understand that self-preservation and the preservation of his network is more important than his ego and conflict with Batman. This is how Oz thrives, how he's always survived, and what makes him so much different than other criminals. He doesn't want mass casualty events or grand spectacle. He doesn't want to send a message to burn the city down. Oz wants to survive. All he wants is to amass wealth within his own business, power, and in the Penguin, we know that this was almost exclusively driven by his love for his mother, a love which now seemingly is no longer a factor since she is catatonic after her stroke. Oz now needs to secure his empire, and if that means paying a small price to Batman by way of information, then he is smart enough to know that that trade is worth it. If this is going to be a cornerstone of this universe moving forward, then we may actually see rival gangs grow fearful of Batman rather than just the Penguin, and it could incentivize criminals to seek out employment under the Penguin. Right now, one of the major criticisms of the Penguin show is how criminals in the series don't really seem fearful of Batman and how Batman doesn't get involved. But going forward, there may actually end up being a specific reason for why. Right now, we know this relationship is not active, so Batman's absence is still a plot oversight. But in the future, this could no longer be an issue. Criminals under Oz may be able to operate with impunity since Oz now has both the Batman and the government on his side, and as long as they follow their job descriptions, they could be safe. One of Oz's final objectives in the series was to amass political power, getting a seat close to the city council, so the government could be a blind spot in Oz's future. If someone wants a job in the underground corner of Gotham, then the Penguin provides a very enticing offer. Protection from legal ramifications, and in the future, it may also provide safety from Batman to some extent. In the Batman, it is clear that every criminal in the city was terrified of encountering him, and if Batman can keep one hand on the wheel of Oz's operation, then he could take this way out. It is not a perfect solution, but it keeps someone worse from entering the equation. These are the guidelines set by Batman in the comics, viewing Penguin as the lesser of other greater evils. But one thing needs to be clear: when the Penguin does step out of line or push his agenda too far, Batman has no qualms kicking him back into gear. But this usually happens only when Oz is directly involved. Penguin knows how to toe the line, especially in the Matt Reeves universe, and I believe that his relationship to Batman will be similar with his one with Carmine. But anyway guys, what do you think of this idea? And do you think that we could see a symbiotic relationship form between Batman and the Penguin moving forward? What do you think we'll see from the Penguin in the Batman Part 2? And what are your thoughts on their comic book versions? As always, my friends, thank you so much for visiting the channel today. Hit that subscribe button for more DC and Marvel lore, and have a great one.